is Saturday, May 21st, 2016. My name is Patty Bernard. I'm with the Nevada Women's History Project, and we are interviewing Fern Lee from Fallon, Nevada. This is part of the John Ben Snow Grant. It was awarded to the Nevada Women's History Project on women of Highway 50, Women of Nevada.
My name is Fern Annette Norcutt Lee, and I was born in Fallon in 1943, and we lived there off and on. Basically, Fallon's been home forever, but we did move around a lot. I've been involved in ranching my whole younger life, and until, probably 20 years ago, we moved to the city of Fallon, which was a real shock, and I became the deputy city clerk for Fallon. Before that, my husband is a contractor, so I was involved in that. But in my younger life, we were a ranching family and moved all over the state of Nevada and back to California a couple times. And it was really great fun because we got to do lots of fun things. You know, we went to different ranches, and of course you meet lots of people, and I know lots of people from all over the state, even though I was a young kid at the time. You know, you just know the name and you know them, you know, so that's always been fun. But basically after that, I became involved in the banking world, and I worked for 3 different banks for about 30 years. And I ended up as president of the last bank, and it was a small community bank in Fallon. So that was always fun. I don't think there's been another woman president in the state, so that was fun. We had a good time with that, and I liked it.
Tell me a little bit about who your parents were and your husband's name and your children.
Oh, okay. My parents are Bob and Edith Norcutt. They're both gone now. And my dad, as I said, was a cowboy and worked all over until he retired from TCID. We moved back to Fallon when I was in the 7th grade, I think, and he went back to work for TCID, which is Truckee Carson Irrigation District, and he was the manager at their community pasture and ran the cattle until he retired. 20 years, basically. So Fallon's home, but we've been everywhere. So that was fun. And Mom was just a very good mom, cooked for all the hay men, all the hay crews, all the cowboys, forever. She was a real trooper, and she was really good about moving anywhere. I never heard her complain about going anywhere, so that was always fun. And then when I was in high school, I met my husband, which his dad and my dad went to school together. So once again, it was our friend, you know. And when they were going to school together, they used to race each other's horses at noon for their lunches. So that was always a fun thing. And I have 4 brothers, Norman, Kenneth, Bobby, and Jackie Norcutt. And most of them live in Fallon. One lives in Lovelock. And then Rich's family has been in Fallon, Nevada for 7 generations. So I always think about that as being fun. His dad was William Lee, William and Josephine Lee, and he has 4 brothers. So we have lots of boys in our family. And then I have 2 boys, and that's Kenneth and Jimmy Lee. And they're in the ranching business. Kenny and his wife Tammy are, and they have a place in Fallon. And Jimmy, he works here in Carson at Vidler Water Company. He's their ranch manager. He takes care of all their land, and they have it all over the state, here in Arizona and California and Idaho and Texas. He goes a lot, so he's busy. Then got grandkids, 2 boys, and they're involved in the ranching industry in different ways. Tommy, the oldest boy, he has roping cattle, and he puts on ropings all over the state. And so that's always kind of fun. And his wife, she gives lessons in like breakaway roping, team roping, goat tying, all the girl classes. In fact, I was taking care of the great-grandkids this morning, and she was giving lessons because the state finals are coming up. So that's always fun. And then Flint, the other boy, he's a horse trainer, a stock horse trainer, and he has his own business in Fallon, and he's done very well. and his wife works for Core Rochester Mine in Lovelock. So we're all kind of spread around in different places. And then Jimmy's kids, his wife was the director of the senior center in 3 different places in the state of Nevada, most recently in Fallon for several years. And recently she changed her job to Pioneer Livestock, which just opened a new branch in Fallon. So she's enjoying that. It's a big change, but she likes it. And their 2 kids are, neither one's married yet. The girl, she lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and Sterling, he's 16, so he just got the driver's license. He's a big guy. That's my family.
You had an interesting early schooling life. Can you talk a little bit about?
Oh, I did. It was always fun. As I said, my dad moved to a lot of different ranches, and some of the places that we went to didn't have schools that were close enough for us to go to. One of the places that we worked at, the first place that we worked at that we had to have a teacher other than a community teacher, was the upper head of Dixie Valley, Buffalo Valley it was called. And the ranch was owned by Mrs. Savell, and her foreman at that time was Johnny DeFarina. And my dad worked for him for a while, and then he told him, well, we were going to have to move because us kids had to go to school. And Johnny said, oh no, Bob, I can't let you go, you know. So anyway, he went to Winnemucca and married his girlfriend and brought her home, and she was our teacher. Joanne DeFarina, she was a great person. We loved her, so it was fun. And then we lived at a place in Tonopah. It was called 5 Mile, and it was 39 miles from Tonopah. I don't know why it was called 5 Mile, but it was. And we got a teacher there from Kentucky, and it was Mrs. Covey. And I don't know how she got to Tonopah, I really don't. But anyway, she was our teacher there for a while, and she lived with us. And it was kind of funny because Mrs. Covey didn't know how to drive, and she was probably, I would say, in her 60s somewhere, late 60s. And so I wanted to go for a drive, you know, anything to drive when you're a kid. So anyway, my dad said, okay, sis, take the pickup and go close this gate up on this mountain. So I did, but you know, being a kid, you just close the gate and you think you have to turn around right there, you know, instead of going through the gate and turning around. Anyway, my mom, when I got home, well, she asked Mrs. Covey, how was her driving? I think I'm in the 5th grade then. And Mrs. Covey told her, well, her driving was fine, but I was worried about the casings. Other than that, I think we had teachers, just community teachers. One year, my brother and my oldest brother, we spent a year living with Bill and Ida Vieira in Stillwater because my folks were working on a ranch in the upper end of Dixie Valley. So we spent a year with them. They were really good people. I loved them, but that was the longest year of my life. When you're in the 2nd grade, that's a long time. But other than that, I think it was pretty much just home, you know, with Mom and different ranches. So.
And in high school then, you went all years through Churchill County High School?
No, my freshman year, we were in Gabbs. Actually, my dad was working for Pete Cushman on the Camel Creek Ranch, which is on the Austin side of the summit, and we'd stay there in the summer and go to Gabbs in the winter. So we went to school in Gabbs that year, my freshman year, and then that next year we went to Fallon permanently. So the rest of the time I went to Churchill. So it was fun.
You were married, I believe, about 60, 61?
Yes, in 1960, Rich and I got married, and I was the ripe old age of 17. You know how that is. Madly in love and knew everything, you know. And at that point, right after that, I went to work in the banking world, which probably was about 63, I believe. before that, I worked at, through school, I worked at, it was a place called Kix, and it was like a little soda fountain. And then I worked at the Dairy Queen, and it was a brand new place in town, so it was really fun. And you didn't have to do dishes, no dishes, you know. But then after I really went to work, and I went to work in the banking world and started out, of course, like everybody else, you know. I didn't know anything about banking. I was just a kid, you know. But you learn. They just started using computers then, and I can remember it was huge. This computer was huge, you know, and we'd have to go to Reno ever so often to see this computer that was as big as a room, and they would tell us, you know, one of these days there's not going to be any paper. You know, we're going to have computers and we're not going to have any paper. And I think about that now, and we have as much paper or more than we had then in the business world. But I started out as a teller like everyone else that starts out in banking. And then we posted everything by hand on our level. You had to put all your checks alphabetical, you know, and every teller had a certain portion that they had to alphabetize, you know, every day. And of course you think you know the alphabet until you start going ABC, you know, and you find out that it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be. But we'd do that, and then we'd hand post them on statements. And then finally when the computer world really worked, well then they posted them, and of course it was a lot easier then. I started out at First Interstate Bank, which was the oldest bank in Fallon. It had been there for years. And that was fun, and I worked there 9.5 years, and I got a job offer at Security Bank, and so I went there as their operations officer. And so that was, of course, you learn a lot of new things when you go to a new bank and the way they do things. So that was always fun. And like you say, in the 60s and 70s, people weren't quite sure they wanted a woman boss, you know. Not even the women weren't sure they wanted a woman boss. So that was always an interesting thing that happened. And I worked for them for another 9.5 years. I don't know what that magic number is, but it is.
What kinds of things did you do as an operations manager?
Basically, you took care of the problems that people had. You know, if you came in as a customer and you thought something had happened to your account that wasn't right, or you didn't think it had been handled right, or you got mad at the teller that you were talking to, or just a lot of different things. Basically, you were the person, the go-to person if there was any kind of a problem. So, and that's what I done. And then, of course, you had to do a lot of certifications to prove everything balanced and that it was all right. So that was my job, to do that. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed all of that. And I enjoyed the people. So that's the best part of banking, is you meet so many people. And there's very few people I can say I don't like. You know, there may be some that have their feathers ruffled, but they smooth out, you know, and they're fun. So that was probably the best part of it. Like I say, there was a lot of people that didn't know whether women should be in charge or not, but when you got to know them and they got to know you, it was fine. We always had a good time after that. So,
how did you handle those kinds of individuals that probably had not really worked with a woman in any type of supervisory capacity? Are there some tricks of the trade that you kind of relied on?
Well, there wasn't, because it was new, you know, new to the people and new to you as a person. So you kind of just felt it out. I always went on the thought that if I was in that position, how would I want to be treated? And so that's how, if one of the girls or one of the guys came and had a problem, I'd just let them tell me everything they could tell me about it, you know, everything. And you usually found out what the real problem was, which wasn't what it started out to be. And that always seemed to solve it. And that was the same way with the customers. You know, sometimes they just wanted to be mad. And so if you just let them be mad for a few minutes, that's all they wanted. They were fine. There really wasn't anything wrong. They just wanted to be mad. So if you just let them talk and tell you all about it, it was probably fine, after that. So it was interesting. And then I was there, like I say, another 9.5 years. And some people came to me and we wanted to open a community bank. And that was really interesting because here you are again, another woman trying to open a bank, and they had a president. His name was Joseph Savigny, but he was new to Fallon. No one knew him. And the people with the money that you're trying to get to invest in your bank are really concerned about who is this man that I don't know. So that was all. I found that I got pulled along because I knew the people. So that was interesting. But we finally got it together and got the bank open. And it's really a lot of work to open a bank and to get enough money to open it. And then we had one big investor from out of town, there's always one from out of town, and he wanted to do a lot of different things than the local board wanted to do. We opened it with the idea that we was going to help the businessmen in Fallon and the community people. If they needed a $1,000 loan, we wanted to give them a $1,000 loan because you've known them. It's the local rancher or the local businessman that's been there forever. They should be able to walk in the bank and get the money that they need to do what they need to do. So we had our moments over that. So that was always interesting because, of course, on paper, sometimes it didn't look so well. But it was fun. We got it going and kept it going, but eventually the bank sold. The person that owned the most stock, he decided he thought he could get more money than he was making at the bank. So he sold, and he had the majority interest. So that was kind of the end of our community bank. And it was sold, I don't know, several times after that, and it's actually closed now. So we have a lovely building on Main Street without a bank.
And from there you went?
From there, I took about a year off and didn't do anything. I just decided maybe I should just stay home. Well, I almost went nuts. So, Mayor Ken Tedford, he's been the mayor in Fallon for years. He appointed me as deputy city clerk for the city of Fallon. And that position is like the office manager. We done all the utilities for the city. The water, electric, sewer, all of that, and sanitation. So we done all the billing for that. And of course, when you're dealing with the public, once again, there's things that go wrong. So that was basically my job there, was to see what was wrong and attempt to fix what was wrong if there was something wrong. And so I done that for 19.5 years. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. But we had some sickness in our family, so we decided, if we're going to do anything, we better get moving. So my husband retired. He was a general contractor, and he loved to work on ranches, and he'd been all over for every ranch that ever had their house remodeled in the upper state of Nevada. I think he done it because he loved it. He'd just go from one to the other, and he had a good time with that. He also was the director for the high school rodeo for years, and we came from that background because my dad started the first high school rodeo club in Fallon, and then he helped Bob Tallman in Winnemucca start that one, and so it went from there all over the state. Now I think there's a high school rodeo club in almost every town in the state. And then Rich was their director for 25 years, and that basically was he went to every rodeo in the state all year, and then they went to the national finals. The kids went to the national finals wherever that was, and then he put on that rodeo. He was always the shoot boss, at those rodeos, and so he done that for 25 years. So we have a lot of rodeoing in our family. I told him I've sat on more seats than you can even imagine. My brothers all rodeoed, my nieces and nephews, my kids, the grandkids, everybody rodeoed. So it's been fun but busy. So when he retired, we've kind of gotten out of it now. We just go watch the grandkids and the great-grandkids.
Fern, you were in Fallon really at a period of several items that were of interest. One was the Top Gun, or the military naval base.
Yes.
And also at that point was quite a consternation about the water and the testing from southern Nevada.
Right, there was. We had, I don't know if you remember, but we had the epidemic of the leukemia epidemic in Fallon, and they always related it to the arsenic in the water. Although when it actually came down to when they done the water studies, they could not prove that it was anything to do with that. But it still has the connotations, and especially with the military people. They were quite concerned about that. And when they moved to Fallon, you know, was their children gonna get leukemia? And they were very worried about it. But the base has always been a part of Fallon, and Fallon's a part of the base. And so basically, being in town, a lot of the military people lived in town, so I spent a lot of time talking to those people and trying to overcome or discuss and tell them, you know, that like my husband's dad, he's lived there his whole life, and he's in his 80s, you know, and he drank water that was never treated. So now we have a water treatment plant, and the water is good, and you know, so it was an interesting time, a nerve-wracking time, not only for the military people but the people in town, because no one knew what the leukemia epidemic was about. In fact, my nephew was one of the boys that got leukemia. He was one of the first ones, and they lived in Austin for part of that year and then came to Fallon, and he came down with leukemia. He's been very lucky. He's healthy and doing well now, and so that was great. But those kind of things, the city of Fallon done everything they could do for them, those families. We provided transportation for them. We done a fund for them where they could get money to travel to wherever they needed to go. We helped them with food, gas, travel, anything that they needed help with that we could do, we did. And so that was interesting. You got to meet some of those families and hear their stories and try to help them, you know, and that was a scary time for everybody, you know. But it was just a fluke, I guess, because we haven't had any cases since, and or if has been a case, it's been one, you know, it hasn't. It's just like any other community now. But that was a difficult time for the city of Fallon and for the people of Fallon. I always felt sorry for the Navy because it was such a big deal on the news. I mean, you heard it every time you turned the TV on or the radio. It was talking about the cancer cluster in Fallon, Nevada. And of course, right then, there'd been a lot of growth until that happened. And then it was like all of the out-of-town contractors, they were afraid to complete what they had bought the ground for. You know, I mean, it was just a scary time, and it went on quite a while. But once that got passed, then Fallon has boomed since then. And of course, it's like everywhere else. There was a boom and a bust, but they've done well. They've done really well. So I always thought it was great that the city done everything they could to help those families. You know, they set up a fund, and we monitored it, and it was great. So. Were
you in city government at that time?
Yes, I was. So, and it was processed through our office. So, you know, you met a lot of people, and it was good, but it was sad sometimes too. They didn't all have happy endings, so the moms and the dads, and those are very hard. You didn't want it to turn out that way, but it was good that we got through it, and that it really wasn't the water or an epidemic of some unknown sort. They thought maybe it was the oil lines that caused it. You know, some of the old service stations had rusty tanks, and that the gas or oil had gone in the ground, and they was sure that must have caused it because one family lived close to that, or the other one, Southwest Gas, must have caused it because they lived close to them. And I mean, it just went all around the whole city and county with varying reasons why suddenly all these little kids are sick, when in reality I don't believe it was any of those things. It just was a time when a bunch of little kids got sick, because some of those kids weren't even from Fallon. They even moved there, and when they first got there, within a week or two they were diagnosed. So, you know, I mean, you could, and it was like my nephew, he came from Austin. In fact, I noticed that Devin was his name, Devin Norkett, and he came in and he was sitting at my mom and dad's table, and he was sitting on his mom's lap, and he just looked really pale. And I said to his mom, I said, "Boy, Devin looks really pale, don't he feel good?" And she said, "You know, he hasn't felt very good for a few days." And so that started it. Then she went back to Austin, and the health nurse there is actually the one that sent her to Reno. And from there, they send her to the Children's Hospital. And you just don't know how you're going to find those things, but he was the first one that was really diagnosed. And then it went, you know, there were several after that. So it was a scary time.
Fallon at the Naval Air Base is so important for Fallon. How do they work together, the two different communities?
They are two separate communities, but they are also one community. It's kind of difficult to explain, but the captain of the base and the mayor and the chamber and all of them try to work together on any issue that comes up. They really do. And I admire them all for that, because, you know, those people, they need the same things that our people in the city needed. You know, they need good grocery stores or clean water or whatever it is. You know, that's the things they need. And they are very helpful for each other. Like, we had an oil plant catch on fire right in the middle of town. And of course, the local fire department, it's a volunteer fire department, it went, and they done everything they could do, but they only have water, and spraying water on oil and gas, you know, just doesn't work. Well, the Navy came with their foam, and they had it out in a few moments. But those tanks before then, you could see them, and they were just pulsating. It was like they were going to blow any minute, those tanks of gas. And so, you know, that's just one of the things that they've done for us. And if there's a search and rescue, any type of search and rescue in the county, they always help. If there's fires, they always help. We just try to help each other, whatever the issue is, because they all live in the same place, basically. But I know it doesn't always work that way in some places. You know, they're kind of two worlds, but they've worked very hard at keeping them together. And that was always interesting, because when we were kids, when we were very young, that was the big issue. It was the high school kids against the sailors, you know. And I know there were a lot of fights over the high school kids and the sailors, but you don't ever hear anything of that anymore. I don't know if it just doesn't happen or you just don't hear about it, but they've got things to do at the base now like they never used to have. When we were kids, you know, some of the sailors were 18 years old. Well, what do they do in Fallon, Nevada? You know, you either drink or go to the movie that changes once a week, you know. And when I worked at the soda fountain, the other nights they were in there drinking Cokes because they didn't know what else to do. So there's a lot more things now. You know, they have bowling alleys and they have a new theater, and there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things at the base for them too. So that's helped a lot.
You talked a little bit before about the Senior Citizen Center and the Seroptimus involvement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The Seroptimus started the Senior Center in Fallon. There was a lady that donated some money, $1,000, to get some of the seniors Meals on Wheels or food that needed it. And that basically sparked the idea. Well, Seroptimus is a women's organization, and so they decided they were going to put together a senior center because we felt it was so important, not only for the meal, but to have some place for them to get together. And that has really worked well. We got a building, an old church. I belonged to Seroptimus. I wasn't there when it very first started, but I was in on a lot of the fundraising, bake sales, yard sales, whatever we could think of to do to get this old church and get it set up with, you know, tables and chairs and everything that we needed to set up a senior center. And it's been in business until now. Seroptimus ran it from 73 to about 94, I believe it was. And then they turned it over to the center, or to the county coalition, just because a service club, that's a lot of work for a service club, and everybody is so busy. So they did, and it was the right thing to do. But that was interesting, some interesting years keeping that open, and through, we had directors, good ones and bad ones over the years, really good ones at first, but then we went through a spree of really bad ones, and that wasn't fun. But we kept it open. And a lot of the other senior centers in the state helped us. Like, I went to Yerington, they gave us food. Hawthorne gave us food. You know, just things when one of the directors, and she wasn't malicious or didn't do anything really wrong, she just overspent her funds before the next grant. And because she remodeled it, she put in new carpet and beautiful. I mean, she tried to do it right, but she didn't have control of her budget. So at the end there, we were really scrambling before the next grant year to keep it open. But we did, we kept it open, and it was a good thing. But now they have a new building. They got a new grant from the William Pennington Trust, and we are building a new building, and it should open, well, they say 2 years in 19 or 18, but now they think it will be the end of 17. So I hope so, I don't know, but they've broke ground, so it's moving along, so that's good.
What is the number of senior citizens approximately that they service?
We right now are doing about 310 Meals on Wheels, and probably roughly 100 to 125 probably in the building a day. So that's a lot for a little old building to put those meals out every day, you know, but it's been good. And they have lots of things to do there. They play bingo, and they have arts and crafts, and they build puzzles, and they have classes. There's a computer class going on there now, and they have a resource officer there, and people can come and make an appointment, and if they need help, their Social Security's messed up, or they don't know how to apply for the insurances they need, or their tax returns, you know, not done right, and they don't know what to do. So she helps them with that, and any of the other services they need, like if they need food, or just who to go to and how to get what you need, basically, is what she does. So that's been a real help. That's been great. And then they have some attorneys that come a couple times a month and donate their services to the seniors. So if they have a legal problem of some kind, they've got somebody to go see that doesn't cost them an arm and a leg, so that's always good. The senior center's been a big part of my life. I've been involved in it from beginning. I donate my time now a couple days a week. I volunteer at their desk and do their money sign-in type thing. They volunteer what they can afford to pay for their meal, and we don't pay any attention to what that is. They just put it in the box, whatever they can afford. And then I've helped since my daughter-in-law left the center and went to her new job. I've been helping the girl that's filling in until they get a new director. And we got a new director yesterday, so things should look up. So it's been interesting for everybody.
What do you feel most proud of as a long-term resident of Churchill County and Fallon, and what you have done in the community?
That's hard to nail down because I've done, like I said, several different things, but I think first of all that I have great kids. So they must have had fairly good parents, so I love that, and that my parents helped me a lot with my kids. They're gone now, so they won't ever hear this, but I always told my mom I always wanted to help them when they needed it because she helped me when I needed it, working and raising my voice. That's probably the thing that I'm the most proud of. But then the other things, as far as the business world, I was really proud to help open the bank because it gave us a place for the man down the street to come to get some money or deposit his money or know somebody to talk to. Because so many times people change so many times in those local banks. You may know this guy, but the next one that come in, he doesn't know anything about ranching, maybe. Or he's a businessman, and that man is great to see him, you know, the local store owner, he really wanted to see him. But the rancher then doesn't have anybody to talk to. Or the guy from the base, he maybe doesn't have anybody to talk to. So we tried to get a variety of people in as officers in our bank that could understand, you know, the different businesses, and if they didn't totally understand it, at least make them feel comfortable enough to go talk to who they had to go talk to. You know, so I always liked that, and I liked that the board was local people because they brought a lot of business to us too, just because they knew the people. So I always loved that part of it. I hated it that the biggest investor was not interested in Fallon, Nevada. So that part was bad, but that was probably the best thing that happened. I loved that. And then I really enjoyed working for the city. That was a good time. I loved the people, and I loved who I worked for. They were great, and we had a really good time there. We worked really hard, but we had a really good time there, so I loved it. So I would say it's hard to sum up, but those are the things that strike me first, second, and third. So other than that, I've lived in Fallon most of my life, and I'm sure I'll live there the rest of my life. It's home.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.